Now you're multitasking. Fantastic.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Sarah. Isaac, can we come to you, please?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. My name is Isaac Samuels, and I live in the east of London with my husband and 4 dogs. I've self-directed my own care and support since 1997. So I would like to start off with sharing my own experiences, and then I want to talk about the work that I've been doing recently. So I think social care and me have always had a disagreement on what independent living is. Social care is always focused on task and time rather than a life with purpose and meaning. I've always had a deficit in the amount of support that I've received as a person to live a life with meaning and purpose. And when I say a life with meaning and purpose, I don't talk about those really great aspirations of, flying to the moon. I'm talking about having a relationship, being able to be in employment, having a home that's warm and safe, being part of my community. Most people take for granted. I cannot do that without support from people on a daily basis. Every year, I have an assessment, and every year they try to take away the hours that enable me to have a good life. So we've had various legislation. So most recently, we've had the white paper on adult social care. We had the Care Act, and many of us thought the Care Act was something that was going to enable lots of us to get the right support that we needed. I would say it was a massive disappointment for me and many people like me, because it didn't really enable us to have really good care and support. What it meant was local authorities, such as my own, made up the rules. I would say that my relationship with the local authority has been adversarial, to say the least. Often people do not even understand the basic ideas and principles and values behind independent living. I'm often having to educate social workers on what independent living is in the first instance. How disappointing is that? I would like to share my most recent experience. When COVID hit, I called up social care and said, look, I'm really, really struggling because I'm in a shielding group, and I was told to call back. I never had any contact from social care in the whole of COVID. And myself and Katie and other people on this call were instrumental in developing some of the guidance for the Department of Health and Social Care for people like us to manage COVID and self-direct our own support. So we've had many problems over the years. We've had austerity, Brexit, we've had reform to social care. And I would say that you cannot separate housing, you cannot separate benefits, you cannot separate all of these things from the lives of disabled people. It is increasingly hard to be able to manage on a day-to-day basis. I'm really lucky and fortunate that I can advocate for myself. I have a really strong family network. I have the ability to go and come onto Zoom, and I can reach out and fight and challenge rules that often don't see me as a unique individual with basic needs. One of the things that is the most frustrating things that has ever happened to me was 3 months ago, I received a letter from social care telling me that I owed them £4,000 for backdated care charges. I sent it back to them and asked them how they came to that decision, as I hadn't had a reassessment. My understanding was that they would need to reassess me to identify what my allocated charges would be. The frustrating thing is, even though I do pay towards my social care, I have very little control over how I use that money. So I'm paying for something that I can't have much control over, which is really sad and disappointing. This does not enable me to have a really good life. It often means that I have to have really unflexible or inflexible support. It often means that I have to decide how I use my budget, often going without support when it should do. I think poverty is something that all disabled people should be worried about and concerned about, particularly as we know that Most local authorities now are looking to recoup all of the money they've spent on COVID. My local authority wouldn't go as far as saying that, but they are stopping day services. They're making it more difficult for people to get care and support on a daily basis. They are removing things such as flexibility. They are making decisions based on large numbers of people. So all of those with mental health support are no longer able to access anything other than personal assistance. So in my budget, historically, there was access to the gym, there was access to leisure, and there was some support to manage my mental well-being. That has been removed. For many of us, we have to fight and challenge systems and processes that don't make any sense. And I want to talk about some of the work that I'm doing. It's really important to highlight that I'm really privileged and I have lots of skills and ability and lots of networks. Even somebody like me that is the chair of an all-parliamentary group on adult social care finds it difficult to challenge social care, let alone the people where I live. I live in one of the most poorest boroughs in London. I live in Newham. Newham Council has made some really harsh decisions about how they will support people with social care. Those decisions weren't co-produced at all. We know that in some places in London, particularly in London, some local authorities has decided they won't charge people for social care at all. When I had my assessment for social care charges, they talked about money rather than a life with purpose and meaning. The impact on paying these costs for me will not only mean that I will have to cut back on everyday essentials, I will not be able to work as much as I want to, I will have to spread my finances really thin. This has a massive effect on my partner as well. They told me as well that they were going to take into consideration the support getting from my family and my partner, even though the Care Act is really clear that they should do a Care Act assessment that was blind to the care that I had or from loved ones. Really disappointing. I find myself lost in this process, but actually what I find is being able to support people, and I've been working with an organisation called Newham People First, and I will talk about the role of peer advocacy. Peer advocacy is really important to, one, help people challenge decisions that don't make sense. One, to help people and their families really have support in difficult times. I don't know about any of you, but when I get those brown letters from social care, they sit on the side for about 2 weeks before I can even open them because they're traumatic, to say the least. They're never good news, and I really can. I often have to go through a process of emailing about 100 people to get a simple answer. And often when I challenge, the decision is in my favour, but actually that has a massive toll on me personally. It has not a toll on me, but my health only. My mental health is affected by this. I have had many relapses because of my interactions with social care. They have never been positive. They have always been adversarial. I'm really lucky that I have support to be able to manage these. We've developed a group of people with lived experience of adult social care in Newham that to support other people around accessing social care, particularly challenging charges, particularly looking at how we can maximise people's benefits. Often people don't know what benefits they should be on or not on the right benefits at all. During COVID, people had benefit sanctions, people were unable to access particular benefits. With the legacy of people moving from independent, EIP, personal independent payment, and the backlog has meant many people just don't have any additional income to support their needs. It's really important that we enable people to come together to share their resources and skills in a way that supports them challenge the local authority around some of the rules. Charging doesn't have an impact only on people's well-being, it has a day-to-day impact. People are not putting on the heating. People who cannot regulate the heat are going cold. This has a massive detrimental effect to their health and well-being. People are scared to ask for help because they don't know where to go. And when they do ask for help, they feel that they will be seen as somebody not being able to manage. People are going without meals. I can't believe that we're actually in this state. But no surprise, one of the solutions to this is actually the role of peer advocacy. We offer one-to-one mentoring over the phone or via Zoom. We've started to go back into person. However, we're aware that COVID hasn't gone anywhere. It's still really present in many people's lives. Poverty is a massive concern. All of our calls are either about welfare benefits, social care charges, or debt and advice around keeping warm. We recognise that as a group of people with lived experience, we can offer a great solution to this by helping people fill out forms, write letters and emails, challenge decisions. But more than that, with a friendly face, we've developed a peer support group where people can just come have a chatter over a brew. It's been really great to offer that service. We're really conscious that many places don't have this kind of support, but the role of peer support is really important. I don't know if you wanted me to cover anything more, but one of the things that I would say is that where I am in East London, it's really fragile. So we're in a building that is a room that's rented to us. We have one computer in the office that we are barely keeping afloat. Lots of us are doing this in our spare time, but it's so important because I know that when I'm at home, I'm often worrying about the things that most of us disabled people are worried about. A massive disparity in between the amount of care and support I get compared to the care and support I need. The fact that structures such as work and benefits are inflexible and don't support me to have a great amount of savings. The fact that my partner at any time may need to give up work due to the challenges of COVID and my own health conditions. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you for listening to me.
Isaac, thank you so much for sharing both your personal and your work experiences. There's lots in the chat, lots of comments of appreciation for you. And I'm sure there may be questions for you later when we come to discussion. So thank you, Isaac. Julia, could we come to you now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm Julia. I work for Inclusion London, and I'm speaking to you today from Birmingham. I actually live in London, but my partner has COVID and I've had to move out because I'm in the shielding group. So I'm talking to you from a temporary office set up on my mum's dining room table. So I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, I want to talk a bit about the cost of living crisis and the impact that it's having and the policies that have been put in place to try and deal with that. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about care charging. Isaac's just given a wonderful account of how this actually works in practice. I'm going to talk much more from a policy perspective. And I'm going to talk about what we're doing at Inclusion London on this, because we have campaigns on poverty and on care charging, and we would love all of you to get involved. So I will give you details about how to do that as well. So first of all, I'm sure you're all aware, and I know you are, that the prices of basic goods are rising really rapidly at the moment. Inflation is up to 6% at the moment, so that's how quickly prices are growing. Benefits and pensions will be increasing by 3.1% in April, and that's because that was set based on the inflation rate in September. So what we're going to see is that prices in April, when the energy price cap increases and energy prices go up even more, then we're going to see that the benefits and pensions money that we get does not increase at the same rate. And so effectively, we're all getting a pay cut. The energy price cap, as I said, increases in April, and this means that the price that we can be charged per unit of energy that we use increases. So there's no overall cap on how much a household can pay for energy. It's really how much you use, but each individual unit of energy will go up in price. this is a particular problem for disabled people, as I'm sure all of you know, all of you are experts on our lived experience, because we often have to use more energy for heating costs, to deal with lower mobility, or to manage pain, or to keep us healthy if we have if we're immunocompromised, and obviously for charging medical and mobility aids as well. So at Inclusion London, we recently had an energy bill sent in to us from a 2-person family living with disability. So they are a disabled child and a single parent carer, and their energy bills have now gone up to £1,000 per month, which is just utterly, I mean, I can't imagine how they could possibly pay that. So the government has announced some measures to try to help people with this energy crisis, but the package is completely inadequate and also not tailored at all for disabled people. So I'm going to talk very quickly through what that package is. First of all, there is a £150 council tax rebate for everybody who's in council tax bands A to D. That means that money is not particularly well targeted, because richer households who are in D band property will get it, and some of the poorest disabled people will not, because they may already be exempt from council tax. There's also a £200 upfront discount, which will be taken directly off bills, and this is not something that you opt into, it's just going to happen for everybody. The plan at the moment is for that to be repayable over the next few years. And for us, that's really storing up problems for the future, because there's no sign that our incomes will have any more space in our budgets to be able to pay that back. There is a consultation happening, and we will be feeding into that to say, this just isn't going to help us. It's actually going to do harm in the future. And so we're hoping that that might change, but there's no signs yet that it will. Unfortunately, there are also changes being introduced to the eligibility criteria for the warm home discount, which is another type of support that you can get for energy bills, paying energy bills. And that change in the criteria will remove about 200,000 recipients of PIP and DLA from the eligible group. And that is obviously a really big problem for us. The main issue in how the eligibility is being changed is that it's not taking into account the increased costs for energy that disabled people have. It's not taking into account the fact that we have to use more energy, that it isn't a choice, something that we have to do. And so again, that's something that we're going to be advocating on. So then moving on to care charging, all of you know the problems, I think. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly. And what I'm going to do is give a quick overview of how it works. But I want to encourage all of you. We have a campaign website called Scratches. The address is www.scrapcarecharges.com, and I'll put that in the chat when I've finished speaking as well. And I'd really encourage all of you to go and have a look at that. Some of you I know who are on the call are really involved with this campaign already, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to those of you. Nadia, I know some of the people from the Cheshire Disabled People's Group is here as well. So as Isaac mentioned, the Care Act 2014 gives councils a power, or basically a choice, to charge for care services in our homes if they want to. Only one council in the whole country has chosen not to do that, and that's the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. Every other English council does charge for social care in people's homes. So how that works is councils do an assessment of a person's care needs. And Isaac has talked already about how those look very much at kind of basic needs like feeding, toileting, washing, and they don't take into account the need to be able to live a fulfilling life. The council then looks at a person's income and assesses how much they consider they can contribute to their care. And that assessment looks assets. So it will look at if you have savings, for example, and it also looks at income. And unfortunately, within the income, that includes income from means tested benefits. And so all of us know the means tested benefits are incredibly low anyway. But what this means is that the council can take money from those means tested benefits, which are set at a basic level that that is intended to just basically keep people alive. The government nationally has set something called a minimum income guarantee, and this is where care charging gets a bit complicated. So the minimum income guarantee is the amount of money a person has to be left to live on per week after care charges. And the amount that will apply to a particular person depends on their age and their condition, but it starts from just £72.40 per week. So there are people who are left with just that amount of money to live on per week. One of the problems is that the minimum income guarantee amount hasn't gone up as inflation has increased. So the minimum income guarantee was frozen in 2016, and that means it didn't increase while benefits, while people's wages, while prices did increase over that time. The minimum income guarantee stayed the same. It was unfrozen for a year during the pandemic, but it's been frozen again. And the result of that is that it's 15% below what it would have been if it had increased by the inflation rate every year since 2016. It was already too low in 2016. But effectively, that means that disabled adults who need adult social care delivered through their councils have received a 15% cut in their income since 2016. Even apart from all of the other things that we've lost, the shrinking of care packages. And local councils often take away almost 40% of means tested benefits through this system. So one thing that it's important to know is that disability related additional costs can be exempted from means tests. So if, for example, you have higher heating bills because you're disabled, or you have to buy certain types of equipment, then you can provide evidence of those charges, and they should then take them off assume that you need that money and leave that in your income. And so they disregard that for the means test, and that means that you would be left with a bit more money to cover those costs. The process for doing it, unfortunately, is quite complicated, and a lot of people don't know it exists. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that, that you know about our website, that Scratch Care Charges website, is that we have a template letter on that website. It's under the tab at the top that says Know Your Rights. And that template letter can help with the process of getting your care charges challenged on the basis that they haven't taken into account your disability related extra costs. Unfortunately, councils can and do use debt recovery services against people with care charge debts, and we're currently tracking that and trying to kind of name and shame the councils that are doing that to try to change that situation. And just one final thing to say, the proposed reforms that are currently going through Parliament under the Health and Care Act, which are designed to make sure no older person would have to sell their home to pay for care. Unfortunately, they completely ignore working age disabled people and will do nothing to change our situation. They're also not great for poorer older people either. And so really these things do not solve our problem. So in terms of Inclusion London, we are creating a mailing list for a campaign group about disabled people's poverty. We would absolutely love as many as you as want to get involved with that. And we're currently developing some kind of actions that people can take through that group, and we'll be providing resources to try and make that as simple as possible. So for example, template letters that can be sent to MPs, things like that. I'll put my email address in the chat when I've finished. And if you want to join that group, please email me and I will sign you up and let you know what's happening. And the second thing is, on the Scrap Care Charges website, There is a template letter to write to your MP about care charges and about how unfair this system is and how the depth of poverty that it's leaving us in. So please do go onto that website, and if you haven't already, write to your MP through that. That would be really wonderful and really help our campaign. There are also a lot of anti-care charging campaign groups, local ones, listed on the website, and they include Bringing Us Together. So thank you so much for being involved on that. I'm going to finish there because I know I've gone over my time. I do have some information about fuel poverty grants and schemes, and if anyone on the call would like to know about that, please ask in the questions and I can just run through some of the information that I have there. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Julia, thank you so much. Really, really helpful. After the session, probably tomorrow, Julia, I will be sending out an email with lots of resources that have come up. So anything that you would like us to include on that, we can put the website, scrap the care charges, but any documents, anything you think might be helpful, if you could just email them to me or the link, I can send them out to everyone. Wonderful. So don't worry, everyone, about taking down website addresses. We'll send them all out to you later this week. Thank you, Julia. Lots of appreciation for you in the chat as well. Helen, could we come to you quickly? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Helen Rowlands. I'm the co-chair of the Cheshire Disabled People's Panel, which is an alliance of the five Cheshire region disabled people-led organisations. And I'm also on the executive of the Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People as well. And I work closely with John Abrams at Inclusion London, Julia's colleague, and I have been with John and many other campaigners, some of whom are on the call, including Claire from Win Visible and Anne Pridmore, many others. We have been working now for around a year. I think it would be fair to say it's about a year that we've been working intensively on challenging the practice of charging people for meeting their statutory care and support needs. And, you know, with John, I've put in Freedom of Information Act requests, which have resulted in some very disturbing data being returned to us, which is telling us how many, you know, it's tens and tens of thousands of people who are in debt to the local, their local authority for non-residential care charging is what we've been focusing on. And linked to that is a very worrying picture of local authorities taking debt recovery actions against those disabled people, and that can include use of debt collection agencies, and it can go as far as court actions. And what we're trying to do is establish how that can possibly uphold what's called the well-being principle in the Care Act, the legislation that governs, you know, how local authorities are legally allowed to behave in the administration of and provision of people's social care. The well-being principle states that councils must place the well-being of the disabled service user at the centre of all those decisions, and yet we've found that those people are, as I say, being subjected to debt recovery actions by their councils if they fall into arrears. So there's an obvious conflict there. It's a very serious problem. And we believe that the councils are getting very, very worried about the data that we've got hold of and that we are starting to get media interest in. So Private Eye covered it in its in the current issue. BBC News have covered it. And Chaminda Jayanetti, who writes on social care for The Guardian and The Observer and other outlets, he's writing on social care charging debt at the moment, and he's looking for stories. He's looking for case studies of people who are in debt to their local authority. So if there's anybody on this call, Isaac, and anybody who would like to speak, and he can anonymize your identity. So if you'd be willing to speak to Chaminda, that would be a massive help for raising awareness of this problem. Because what we think is that if you don't have either your own lived experience of the reality of social care, or you aren't supporting or caring for somebody who does, then, or you're not a third sector professional, we believe that the general public's incorrect assumption is that social care in this country is delivered along NHS lines. That's what we think people do believe, and of course we all know the picture is very, very different. So in terms of actions, we are calling on the local authorities to as Julia was explaining, I'm sorry, is it Julia or Julia from Inclusion London? Julia. As Julia was explaining, the central government, the Department of Health and Social Care, set what's called the minimum income guarantee rate at a statutory level. But in the Care Act gives local authorities the power to uplift that at the local level. And so via the Freedom of Information Act request, John and I asked every local authority in England whether or not they're doing that, whether or not they're uplifting. Some of them do, and some of them don't. And the result is that we have this weird kind of patchwork of different minimum income guarantees to disabled people with care needs across the whole of England. You know, it's completely unacceptable. It's a postcode lottery, basically. But we are calling on those local authorities to do everything that they can to uplift minimum income guarantee at the local level. On disability related expenses, we believe that the level of awareness of the existence of that is very low. We know that local authorities are not doing what they need to do to make sure that information on DRE is fully accessible, easy to access, easy to understand. We know that's not happening. And we also know that from our colleagues in London DPOs, especially Greenwich, but also Claire, who's on the call from Winvisible, she's got loads of experience at this. You know, we've had cases of disabled people receiving bills for their social care that they have then managed to reduce to far lower levels, or even wipe out entirely through submitting legitimate disability related expenses. And somebody in the chat has said that they had a bad experience with their local authority refusing to accept utility costs as DRE. Well, that's not lawful. You know, utility costs related to disability are disability related expenses. And I know that Disability Rights UK are on the case with this, you know, and they are lobbying around that issue. Okay, so we are calling ultimately for the cancellation, for the end of care charging in this country, but these are some of the interim measures that we're putting into place. We're calling particularly for cancellation of care charge debt at this point in time. And in Cheshire, where I am lobbying my local council, Cheshire West and Chester Council, very, very hard on this. And I found out that 236 disabled people were in debt for care charges back in 2019. This year, it's now over 900. So there's been a skyrocketing of social care charge debt and debt recovery actions in the space of 3 years. There's something called Stop the Knock, which is a campaign and a set of pledges which is run by the Money Advice Trust. And their website is well worth a look, because they have data visualizations which show you how many bailiff referrals each local authority, I believe it's just England that they've done, have taken. And they don't show you how many of those actions are in relation to social care charging debt. Most of it is to do with council tax and parking charges and things like that. But nonetheless, it's kind of interesting data. And they do have these pledges calling on local authorities to stop using bailiffs to try and recover arrears from residents. So that's something that we as disability rights activists might want to promote in relation to care charge debt. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We really appreciate you coming here this morning and talking with us. I think we'll go to a break shortly, but before we do, Katie, there is a new report that has come out from Carers UK. I think it just came out this week, and you have a section that you were going to read out, Katie. So we'll listen to this, and then we'll go for a 5-minute break. Everyone go and get themselves a drink, toilet break, and we'll come back and restart. I'll give you the time of restarting after we've heard from Katie.
I'm just going to read out just a paragraph from this new report that's come out. It's been sent by Dame Philippa Russell. Extra financial pressure in only 6 months, changes since autumn 2021. This is from the Carers UK. In only 6 months since publishing our State of Caring 2021 report, we've seen an already worrying picture for carers under financial pressure becoming considerably worse. The number of carers who are worried that they won't be able to manage their expenses has more than doubled during that time. Latest findings based on a survey of over 3,300 carers currently providing care show that many are under even greater financial pressures in the face of energy prices and cost of living increases, and that they are extremely worried about how they'll be able to manage their monthly expenses without extra financial support. Unless they have additional help, greater numbers of unpaid carers could be pushed into poverty that will have a lasting impact on their finances and quality of life. And then it's got lots of statistics, and we'll send that out with other resources and information after the session.
We're gathering links, websites, different resources. If you know of any that other people might be interested in, please just put them in the chat, put the links in the chat, and or send me an email. So it is 5 to 12 now. Oh, Nadia's going to leave us as she is going off to meet with the Disability Minister. Good luck, Nadia, and we'll look forward to hearing how you've got on next time. Good luck, Nadia. So 5 to 12 now. We will take a break and we will restart promptly at 12:05. So that should give you enough time to go and get a drink, go to the toilet, stretch a little bit, and then come back for questions and discussion. So see you all in 5-10 minutes.
Thanks, Pippa.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best to do it in order, but we'd ask you to just be mindful when you're making your contribution of the time, the numbers of people that are here that might like to talk and the time that we've got. So without any further ado, Claire, can we come to you, please?
Thanks, Pippa. Yes, so for people who don't know, I'm from Invisible, Women with Visible and Invisible Disabilities. We are a grassroots multiracial group and are part of the Charges campaign, as Helen mentioned. I just wanted to talk about the women who drop out of services due to charging. Like we are helping 2 women with advanced cancer who've both dropped out, one because the charges were too high and she was being threatened with court, and the other is having to spend a lot on alternative treatments and can't afford charges. Also that we are getting together as disabled women, disabled people, family carers and the paid carers on 0-hour contracts, demanding a living wage for all our caring work, including for ourselves and other people. And we're part of the Global Women's Strike Care Income campaign, which is going strong. And also we have a disabled mothers' rights campaign, because although councils don't spend on supporting disabled mothers, they do spend an enormous amount on child protection, fostering and enforced separation, where disabled mums just need some support, but asking for support triggers child protection proceedings. I think some other people mentioned, and one of our colleagues, her son was placed in a hostel at age 16 with adults over 21 with no access facilities, and didn't have a bath or shower for 2 years. I'll put some links in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Our next session next month is going to be on social care and inequalities. So we may well come back to you, Claire, to see if you could talk with us in some more depth. Thank you. Anna, can we come to you, please?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Thanks ever so much. I'm fairly new to DPAC, and so I'm learning an awful lot about what's out there by way of campaigning organisations, which is, I'm just absolutely bowled over that there are some, because I've been fighting a one-person battle for decades and found it very difficult to link up with other people who are very concerned about what's going on. Because just very briefly, to set a context, we're the 5th richest country in the whole world. We are not poor. This is a choice to keep people in poverty. This is a political choice. So there is a political issue, but that's not the route I'm going to go down today. But I think it's really important to say that this is a choice. We are not on the breadline as a country, but we keep people on the breadline or below the breadline, and that's deeply shocking. I come from a family with a lot of mental health problems, so there's a whole bundle of stuff around that. I'm not going to go there today either, but that we should keep that in mind. I have a son who has multiple disabilities, and he's now 56. So I have seen, getting on for 6 decades, of attitudes and provision for people. And I'm particularly concerned about that group of people who do not have a voice. So he has literally no voice. He's non-verbal. And there are many, many people in this situation. If he didn't have me, he would have had an even worse life than he's had. I have seen, he lived in a long stay hospital way back in the day when those were the normal place for people with learning difficulties. We saw the amazing upwards trend when the hospitals were closed, people were accommodated in houses in the community. There was an attitudinal change, which was astonishing, where I can't remember all the names now, I'm afraid, but there were things like normalization, giving people quality of life, all these things that you were speaking about, Isaac, and others. They were in the air. Now, the reality never quite matched the rhetoric, but the rhetoric was there. Where's that gone? It ain't there anymore. And I am witnessing now the most appalling attitudes among a lot of people, not the carers, but anyone in offices working with, anything to do with disability. It's completely changed. And I think that's as shocking as anything that I've seen. Now, I don't want to speak for too long because I appreciate a lot of people do. But what has happened to my son in the last 3 years has been absolutely, well, I would think his human rights have been abused. He was in a situation where his provider wanted to reduce the number of homes they were running. So they had this kind of hodgepodge approach to replacing people in empty places. There's a long story behind that. And he went through a year of his life when COVID hit, by the way, and they didn't stop this process, where he was alone in a house with carers who were busy reorganizing, not looking after him, lost his day centre because of COVID, blah, blah, blah. We finally got him into a place which is absolutely amazing with wonderful carers, but they have been understaffed ever since he arrived a year ago. They cannot get staff, and this is commonplace throughout the care system and particularly in residential care. Now, he and the people he now lives with have complex needs. They need stability, they need continuity. They have none of that. They've got some fabulous people there. 2 of them have just left with burnout. They are absolutely exhausted because they've tried to give people a good quality of life, despite the appalling conditions that they're working under. They've had to leave. Their health has broken down. This is what is going on up and down the country. So this is my particular, and these people cannot speak for themselves. As I've fought for rights for my son and got some of them met, I have watched other people who haven't lived, who does what I can do, and I'm not allowed to fight for them. I'm always told they're not your business, and I can't find anybody else to do it either. So I've witnessed people really, really having their services cut to the bone, and it's deeply affected their mental health. And there's been nothing I could do. I've won certain things for my son. He has still had a terrible time at times, despite all my efforts. So this is a group that I think we particularly need to have in mind because they can't tell us. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Anis, could we come to you, please?
Oh, hi there, everyone. I'll keep it as concise as possible. So for those who don't know me, I'm Anis. I'm originally from Bradford, but now live in Leeds. And my paid job is at the People's History Museum in Manchester. And this summer, we will be launching the Nothing About Us Without Us exhibition, which looks at the disabled people's movement, past, present, and future. To win visible, if I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know if you've come across Sisters of Frida, which is a disabled women's group. And I think it's really important to look at intersectional topics like parents and women and families. For those who may not be able to see me, my pronouns are they, and I'm a person of South Asian descent. And this year will mark 20 years ago when I learned that I belong to this whole different group of people that make 2% of the world population. And whilst this community hasn't been very kind to me because they're more concerned about documentaries and fandom and sensationalism, I feel that I'm slowly meeting lovely people in Leeds, Bradford and Manchester to have that confidence to talk about human rights violations that people who are born somewhere between the lines of male and female go through, and how that links to the medical model of disability. It's lovely to see people from Naxals, and I'm really glad that Cheshire now has several disabled-led groups, because there's so many big impairment Pacific charities out there that siphon off our funding and don't often include our voices. And I'm glad that Bristol for Independent Living are here, and it's lovely that I bump into the same like-minded people. And a big shout out to Justice in Care, which is run by Tom, who I think may be on this call as well. And I just love that that society and the government try to divide us, but we're all from different parts of the country. And I really hope I'm not taking on too much, but I tend to look at the intersections of being disabled, a person of colour, being the I in LGBTI, and recently got involved with Karma Nirvana in Leeds, which looks at the honour-based system, and it can impact people of all different cultures, religions and genders, but predominantly impacts women. And we have a day of remembrance on in July, which came about when a young lass in Bradford was killed in the name of honour by her own parents. So yeah, I work very intersectionally, and I just wanted to share this in a safe space. I'm looking forward to networking with you all. My access is verbal and in person. I don't do social media, and my emails can be a bit random and a bit forward to networking you. And if you'd like me to plug your organisation, I promise that everything will be featured in the exhibition, but we've decided that we're definitely going to have links to current campaigns and websites. And because the themes are past, present and future, I think giving your groups and movements a plug is very important, because we're hoping that people across the country are going to come and see this exhibition, and people can go away with more information about what's currently happening across England. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anis. We really appreciate that you've come today and that you've shared with us. Tom, really appreciate that you've come today and that you've shared with us. Tom.
Is it for me?
Yes, to you, Tom.
Thank you, Anis. I just want to say thank you to her and others who I know, and I've always found her content very, very helpful. Others who I know. I'm getting an echo here. I'm not sure. Is that better? Thank you. I want to thank her and others who I know. Most of you won't know me. I'm an advocate and community organiser in Calderdale, Hebden Bridge. And I know a few people in Calderdale. We need to know a few more, because I think that's the most important message. The more allies you have, the stronger you are. And the more information you can use to challenge. And that's, as an advocate, I know that. I don't want to let anyone down by challenging too prematurely. We need enough evidence. There's one issue I want to raise here, which was brought up in the chat and a few people, and it really concerns me, is yes, poverty. Yes, increasing threats of charges and inflation. Yes, governments and local authorities not taking this into account. And it's a trend that preceded the pandemic and has got worse. But there's one trend that's increased a lot in the last local authorities, and that is safeguarding. Safeguarding training left, right and centre for voluntary sector. It's been rolled out. It seems to be nice, charming and benevolent. And it's really, you know, you find it's growth industry, both within social service department. But is it really about safety? Is it really about looking at essences of children and of young people? You know what? Increasingly, I do not think so. I do not think it's about the best interests of disabled people. I think it serves the interests of professions and large corporate organizations who are there often to take children and young people out of families, especially poorer families who are facing these severe challenges, and put them into care. I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm not saying that every fostering decision is wrong. No, but I feel that there's too bad a disproportionate impact against people in poverty, disabled mothers. I've listened to you many times in meetings. My heart moves for you every time I hear you in various meetings. You're being punished badly by this, not just let down, but punished punitively by a system which doesn't care. And a lot of people are making a lot of money. It's not just Roman Abramovich who's made a lot of money out of his friends out of gas surpluses. There's a lot of corporate organizations in Britain that are doing very well nicely in the last years. And I think that safeguarding is part of it. And I think Nikki Jakes referred in the chat, the confusion of assessments based on Section 47. Threats and safeguarding, get support from social, they should be helping you. And people are frightened to go in for them because of fear of other consequences. I want to bring that into the discussion. I'm sorry if my internet connection is not so great, but that's another struggle for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated. Isaac.
Yes, I'm just going to do a bit of a reflection. So, in the work that I've been doing, very much around connecting to other people with lived experience is really important, because I think there is a fear from people connecting to the very services that are supposed to help them, because those services often are the most punitive, and actually some of the rules that these particular services put in place are the root cause to some of the issues. Domestic violence, we have a terrible housing strategy where I live. We have a terrible policy around welfare benefits, and all of those policies impact on people's daily lives. The adversarial relationship and a really broken relationship between social care, housing, the Department of Work and Pension with the people that use those just leads to more problems. And I think Tom is really right that safeguarding is something that is potentially a real concern, because actually we're not giving people the tools to manage their everyday lives. And often the things that are deemed as safeguarding issues are things that are structural issues within the systems that we are creating locally. For instance, you cannot separate domestic violence, housing, and the lack of kind of provision for women's refuges where I am. So it's really important that in a local area, those very systems and services that enable people to escape domestic violence, but enable people to stay safe, enable people to get the right support.
Thank you, Isaac. Does anyone else have a comment or a question that they'd like to make? Val, could we come to you, please? You need to unmute yourself, Val.
Yeah, it's really a comment. I'm married and talking about abusing the system. It's assumed my husband will take on the bulk of my care for no payment, because he is married to me. And the impact on his life, because I am disabled and cannot be left alone, is tremendous. I do have a carer, and I am funded by my local authority, but the bulk of the care is assumed to be my husband. So that's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Val. Much appreciated. There's some claps going on for you in the chat. Brian, could we come to you next?
Great, thank you very much. It's been a very exciting and useful conference. I've been very moved by lots of people's comments, and really has brought these issues home and made them very clear. I wanted to just tell people about Naxils as a campaign. I hope that's okay, because it's been mentioned a couple of times and I'm not sure whether people know enough about it. We are the National Care Support and Independent Living Service campaign. We're a non-party political group. We have a range of people in the steering group, including disabled people, and a number of people on this call are linked with us, and we're very pleased about that, and to make bigger links. And we're going to be meeting Inclusion London and Invisible soon, we hope, to keep those links deeper. What we are on about is helping and supporting existing campaigns against injustice that we've heard about today, but also we have a bigger vision and we want to try and transform the whole landscape. And to do that, we are talking to politicians, we're talking to trades unions, we are expanding our publicity, we have a website, and we have a 7-point program that the government should have a responsibility for and duty to provide a national care, support and independent living service, adopting into English law articles from the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, that this will be fully funded through government investment and progressive taxation, free at the point of need and fully available to everyone living in the country. So that would be funded on the same basis as the NHS. So publicly provided and publicly accountable, that it would be mandated nationally, which means there would be standards across the country, but it would be delivered locally in a democratic way, involving local people and co-productively with users of the service, that it would identify and address the needs of informal carers, family and friends providing personal support, that there would be a national, so that people who work in the service have a career structure, have proper support, proper training, proper funding, proper pay and conditions. And finally, that we support the formation of a task force on independent and supported living to help design the system, and that it would make recommendations to address wider changes in public policy, and the task force would be led by user-controlled groups of people who require independent living support. So sorry, that's quite a long description, but we think that these ideals are very, very important. And although they sound quite radical, there are an increasing number of sort of mainstream organizations, individuals, politicians who are talking about these more and more. And we think that there is an opportunity to actually get change like this. We'll see. I mean, if the more of us that can work together on all of this, the better.
Thank you, Brian. Before we move on, there is a question from from Tess in the chat. Tess, would you like to ask that question now?
Yeah, I certainly can. I just wanted to know what NACSL's position was on personal budgets, because the website seems to read like everyone should have the care provided by staff in the employment of a local authority.
No, I don't think that is what we think at all. So I think individual budgets are absolutely part of the picture from our point of view. But there is a really big discussion to be had about whether such a NACSL service is run exclusively by the local authority, or whether there are ways in which we can have a mixed economy, not with private providers, but maybe with co-ops, of which there are an increasing number across the country, and what the relationship is between these and the voluntary sector. So I don't think it's a very straightforward picture, actually. I think on the whole, we would favour a mixed economy, so that local authorities probably would provide the bulk, but they would create the conditions whereby co-ops and other organisations within the BCSE sector would be involved and would be able to provide services as appropriate, depending on the area, I guess, and what the energy for that was. What do you think about that?
I think that's. I just want to hold on to our personal budget. That's. I really don't. I think there's a lot of people who have whose needs are specialised, and for whom a generic service is not appropriate. So
absolutely,
I'm keen, but I absolutely applaud you in the big providers are doing incredible damage to the whole system.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tess. Megan, you've had your hand up there for a while.
Hello, my name's James Dean. I'm just visiting Megan at the moment. I was wondering whether anybody else across the country has been provided with a list of their local campaigning or peer support groups when they have applied for a care assessment. So I had an idea that if we went for a care assessment, we'd be provided with lots of information about how we could get peer support or organisations that could support us in understanding what our disability-related expenditure is, beyond just contact with social workers, because they seem unable to properly explain this. And I was wondering if anybody else had experienced that across the country.
Shall we come back to that? We'll let people think about it and we'll come back to that. I'll come to you, Julie, and then we'll go back to your question. So, Julie.
I was going to say we've kind of gone the other way, as in me and Sam. We have decided that instead of the council saying how much we've got to contribute towards our care and then telling us what they will give us, we decided to keep our benefits money and look for services that we can afford with all the rising costs and with everything else. Because the council weren't really finding anything that we wanted. They kept sending us to day opportunities for people with just learning disabilities rather than accepting that we just had autism. So we just decided to go the other way, and we've proved really unpopular with our council, which we didn't expect. They're actually like saying that we're making them look really bad because we're choosing to self-fund from our benefits. But we feel that's the only way we can get what we actually want, rather than them take our money off us and then tell us how we can spend it and that not be something that's going to help us.
That is a really interesting way to go about it, Julie and Sam. How long have you been doing that?
We finished with the council stuff on the 23rd of December.
And have you found that it's worked for you? Is it indeed better?
It is a lot better, but it does mean we have to have fortnightly meetings with the social worker. She seems to want to keep up with us and find out what we're doing, and they seem to want to be more involved with us from a social worker point of view now we're doing this, and are insisting upon, they're calling regular meetings, but they are seeming fortnightly.
That's interesting to tie into the discussion that we've been having around safeguarding, perhaps, even if they're not calling it that. Thank you, Julie and Sam. Right, we had a question around how would I summarise it? Around the response and networking possibilities around carers assessments. Anyone have any comments on that? Not at the minute.
Pippa, aren't we holding a session with Imagineer on carers assessments coming up?
We are. It's sometime in April, isn't it, Katie?
Yeah, Sarah.
Hi. I'm here. Yeah, we're doing a session. So Imagineer's actually just recently developed a webinar on the subject of carers assessments and eligibility. We are going to be offering an opportunity for you to watch that webinar free of charge if you are a person with a disability, long-term health condition or an unpaid carer. And what we'd like to do is offer you the chance to watch the webinar in your own time. It's pre-recorded. I think it's about an hour long, and then an opportunity to attend the workshop following that webinar, so you can come and bring your questions and explore some of the details within that. So we've produced a flyer with all of the information that you'll need for that, and Pippa and Katie will be circulating that, I believe, to everybody on the Bringing Us Together mailing list. So you'll get the information about that via email.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Pauline, I see a comment you've put into the chat. You've said, as a carer for my disabled daughter, I feel I go without more. Oh, my chat's just moved. As my carer's allowance and the little job I have with tiny pension from my husband who passed away. Would you like to tell us more, Pauline? You're on, that's it.
Yeah, I feel a bit difficult because it's sort of like, my husband passed away 3 years ago. Yes, I've got the mortgage paid for. Yes, I've got a tiny little bit, but it means that I cannot access any benefits. So yes, I've just started as a dinner lady in a school, which means I can work around my daughter being at college. But even this week I found difficult because the college, COVID has increased. They want them to stay at home. I have sent her to college so that I can work. If I don't work, I don't get money. So now my budget is small, but my daughter, yes, she is starting to get universal credit. She's got a work capacity assessment next week, or health assessment next week. And I feel as if her money is hers, not mine. But it's the way that when I was at the benefit, but you're a appointee, you have to go to you. And I feel, but it's not my money. And I feel in the quandary because I have another 2 children. I have to treat them. But I'm feeling now I'm going about when they're at school, at work, heating goes off. I'm lucky that because I'm working at school now, I can eat there at lunchtime. And it feels a bit guilty because I feel as if I should be independent. It's hurting more and more.
Oh, Pauline, I'm so sorry to hear that. It is so tough. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to tell of their experiences?
Can I say something? It's Norrin.
Norrin, yes, please do.
It's just tips actually. And I'm sorry because my screen reader is talking at the same time when somebody sent a message, so I interrupt in between. Okay, so if you receive a letter from authority or local council related to the carer services they provide, so please double check it because they do error, so they do mistake, and they send you a letter like which you don't need to pay. And when you inquire, they say it's a mistake, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. We know that local authorities make many, many mistakes. So your advice is well worth heeding. Thank you,
Thank
Nora.
you. And another just quick request. I think somebody said they're going to send all the links and whatever is in the chat. So it will be like an email, right?
Yes, I'll send it as an email.
Thank you, because I'm struggling to click on these links with the screen reader. So once I receive, I'll find it more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It might take me a few days, Norrin, but I will get it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lots of love and strength going to you, Pauline, in the chat. Has anyone else got anything that they would like to say, to ask, to share?
I think Sean wants to talk.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was an old one.
Okay, hold on.
Can we come to, I didn't catch, yes, let's go to you.
I had a confusing time talking to my local Centre for Inclusive Living, and they failed to communicate with me in an accessible manner as I have an Asperger's diagnosis, which left them thinking that I owed them and the council some money for contribution to care costs. They sent me a letter for £3,770 demanding backdated care costs. Then I went through the council's process of complaints, which took a lot out of me to do, and I needed advocacy to do that, where the social worker agreed that I did not owe this money. Then I continued getting demands for the money from the council. Then I complained again to the council, and the director of People Services, head of social care, agreed that I did not owe this money and they were going to contact the council. Then I got more demands for the money from the council, so they didn't have a joined up system. Now I've had to take that to local government ombudsman, and I'm waiting for their final decision. It has taken a lot of time and effort and time with advocates, and it's difficult to get the final advocacy to work with the local government ombudsman to understand their draft decision. The council doesn't seem prepared to understand that it's taken many of my support hours with my PAs to address this. So there's ableism in the system, but I think I'm about to win this. And just to say that it's not an accessible system, but it might be worth carrying on if you have the ability to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And there is indeed disableism in the system. Jan, could we come to you, please?
Yes, I'd like to just say how valuable this group is to me, particularly as a visually impaired person. Sometimes you lack information. You don't pick up information as other people have the opportunity to do. And so I very much value this group. As for the charges, I have been assessed as having to pay charges, as most people have. So I think I'll be looking into some of the information that you're going to be sending out to see if I'll be able to reduce those charges. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jan. We love having you here. Thank you for spending your time, your precious time with us each month. Anyone else have anything that they would like to add? Natalie.
Hello, everyone. I mean, I've very much been moved by everything. I'm a county councillor. I've also been a service user of social care for 20 years, and I've stepped away because of the care charging. I went through 2 years of an ombudsman process, so I can very much relate to spending most of your time just trying to actually get some support. And it is very much a concern that there's not a joined up system. In terms of looking at now from a county council perspective, it is very much a system where they have an answer for everything. And if you look at, I've been on a number of occasions been told that this income of care charges is vital for council survival, and it jeopardizes them from going bankrupt. And one thing that I see quite concerning is this talk of it's down to each and every council. Again, we all know that it's a central government legislation that councils are following, but I'm also on the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee. And where you see there is this increasing demand, we're having greater demand for social care services, that these councils are not equipped to deal with that demand. And what it hits most are the poorer councils, because actually you've got a larger demand of people and you've got a larger demand on social care services. And then those councils are down to the bare bones, relying upon some of the poorest people to actually prop them up. And it's not a case, this is what I find really difficult to come to terms with. It's not a case of let's scrap care charging down to the councils, because they are absolutely, when you've got the poorer councils, there's nowhere else to go. I've just been through a budget meeting and it's just horrendous. So until we have government legislation and address the punitive benefit system, which I'm still battling myself,
it's just nowhere to go. And I feel very, very sad hearing these stories. And they are definitely going to continue until government actually properly addresses this.
Thank you, Natalie. Blake, could we come to you next, please?
So Blake was just saying that he always challenges the budget, the financial payments that he has to. And what he tends to find is that there's always a new person in post who doesn't know what the system is or what the processes are, and are uncomfortable that they're speaking to a third party because Blake's non-verbal. He makes sure he understands himself what the local authorities' systems are, and invariably ends up telling that guy how to do his job. Because he can't speak on the telephone, it has to either go through emails or they have to visit outside. Again, that's another issue that they're uncomfortable with. But Blake seems to find a way of being able to make them understand that it's part of their job, and if they don't do it, then he has every right not to pay because it isn't a legal system, and it's difficult and time-consuming and frustrating, and not something you should have to do just to be able to be financially independent. And lots of other people can't do it. But as the lady was saying, which struck a chord with me, when you're non-verbal, that's another layer on top. But if the support package is good and the training package is good and the PAs are good, then that support system makes it okay for someone who is non-verbal to do that kind of job.
Thank you, Blake. Much appreciated. Julia.
Hiya. I wanted to ask a question back to Natalie. Natalie, thanks so much for what you were just saying about the council situations. One of the things that we've been thinking about at Inclusion London is how councils can kind of speak back to central government on this. And one of the things that we're not seeing councils doing that we've wondered might be helpful is to explicitly state that they have not got enough money to meet their statutory duties. You know, rather than just kind of trying to claw this money from people who cannot afford it, are they able to actually explicitly say this system is broken, we can't meet our statutory requirements and we need more resources? I mean, I know that there are councils saying things like this, but is there a way of getting a collective voice of lots of councils kind of coming together to say that kind of thing, to get the message that this just isn't working and that it's unsustainable?
Natalie.
Yeah, sure. I think the answer that I keep on getting when I'm challenging this is that we as a council are following legislation and the Care Act. And I think this has a lot to do with the Equality Act and the Care Act are not detailed enough to state that there are unmet needs, and that they're pushing a lot of their statutory duty towards discretion. We know that the councils have a choice to raise the minimum income guarantee, and that is, you know, something that I've been pushing. But the reality is, as long as they use the Care Act and say they're following legislation, then there's no need. They can't say that they are not meeting people's needs. It is a real danger that actually, you know, these policies that are meant to protect people are not. And it's very difficult because if you then go to an ombudsman process, they merely look at whether you're following the processes that the council are saying that they're following, not whether those decisions are right or wrong. And you can only really push them on legislation where legislation is not protecting people at this point, unfortunately. I'm sorry, it's not a better answer. Again, yes, there are councils that are saying there are unmet needs, but it is very much determined by the council willing to hold their hands up and being really pushed. And I think media is unfortunately the way to push on this. But I resent that disabled people are being victims in going through these processes and then having to be victims in the eyes of the media, which is a double hit in my opinion. And I personally don't agree with it, but this is where we are as a society.
Thank you, Natalie. Does that answer your question, Julia?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thanks, Natalie. I mean, I know that in some areas of the country there are kind of these above national. So in London, for example, there's a body called London Councils, and it may be that kind of trying to work through those bodies that bring different councils together might be a promising way of doing that. But we'll have a bit of think about that.
Thank you, Julia. Jan, do you have your hand up again? Or is that an old hand? No, that's an old one. Megan Shan, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your name. Can you tell me your name again and then we'll come to you?
I'm using Megan Shan's computer, but my name is James Dean.
James Dean, thank you.
I want to say to Julia that is it 10 or 8 core city mayors, Bristol and Manchester and those kind of things, they have before made a splash in the media by saying to national governments this and that, especially around COVID, etc. So maybe they could be encouraged to make a statement on behalf of councils, local authorities, the funding and social care. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks, James. Great suggestion.
Yeah, thank you, James. Brian, let's come to you.
Thanks. Yes, I also wanted to ask a question of Natalie. But just to say, I don't know what ADAS's position on all of this is. That they have a coordinating role, and I don't know whether they're making enough noise or could make enough noise about the government's position on local authorities. But the question I wanted to ask Natalie is that NACSLs and other groups are planning a campaign leading up to the local elections in May, and that we're putting the points that Helen Rowlands and other people here have made, that there are various things that councils, that are in the power of councils to do, that would either scrap charges or reduce charges. And what do you think, when we talked, I work in Lewisham, when we talked to the Lewisham mayor about this, the councillor who's in charge of social care on the committee in charge of social care said, yeah, there's a very, very interesting, but there's no way we could possibly do it. That's just too expensive. So thank you for the suggestions, but we're not going to implement them. Any thoughts about how we can make the points that have been made here, things that councils can do that would relieve the pressure to some extent, at least, on disabled people? How would councils receive those? How can we best put those messages across?
Thank you for the question. I think there's a couple of things to think about. It is battered around in terms of co-production, and this is not always used properly, but where you are actually engaging properly with people and having a power balance where it is very much about what the council's decision is, but also what the person believes that their needs are being fully met. I think when we're looking at processes, the financial assessments process, we've had it brought to the scrutiny committee. So one way you can do to have it looked at a bit more is to get in contact with the councillors that are on the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, and to really drive home to them, to present information to them, and to get it onto the scrutiny committee to deep dive and look much more at these financial assessment processes, because one thing that's really important are people's disability related expenses. This is an area which is not an exact science. It's constantly changing and evolving. We've just had, one person did mention about, you know, looking at everything's a disability related expense. I'll give an example of, if you have a Motability car, for example, the petrol you need for that Motability car is a disability related expense. And what they do is, particularly, so people on benefits, they go and calculate their costs, and they calculate their disability related expenses and disregard that as that won't come under your care charges. And then they bring you down to the minimum income guarantee. So the more disability related expenses you can get, then the more money you'll be able to keep. And that's actually when I went through an ombudsman process and I overturned the decision on care charging, it was disability related expenses. And there is a kind of a list in the Care Act, but it's not extensive enough. I went to lots of different charities related to my disability to get disability related expenses established. That's one. In the short term, I fully recommend people to constantly contact their council and establish their disability related expenses. And the shocking thing from my case is actually the council produced a piece of paper in the end saying that I was below the poverty line. After all my disability related expenses, I wouldn't be paying care charges, and I was actually falling below. So sorry to go on, but yes, I definitely push for your disability related expenses and better communications, a more simplified process, and get onto scrutiny committees looking and deep diving and picking apart how councils are assessing people for financial contributions.
Thank you so much, Natalie. We are nearly at the end. We are running out of time. There's a lot in the chat. We'll go through the chat and try and pick up anything that we haven't been able to touch on. We will be sending out links, etc. Later this week. If I could come to you, Anna, the last contribution, but really, really quick, if you don't mind.
Thank you. To raise the issue that people are suffering badly because of the appalling way we treat carers, whether they're home carers, whether they're paid carers. They are shockingly undervalued. Their skills are shockingly under-assessed. They are very skilled people and they are appallingly paid. I have no idea what we do about that, but to me, that's one of the central things that get carers properly paid, far more training in my book, and we would have a better service. It will cost more. I don't know what you do about that, but I think that's really key. They're a grossly undervalued group of people, and some of them are amazing, despite all that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brian, you've still got your hand up. Is that an old? Yeah, that's fine. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to check before we go. So all that remains for this session is for me to say a great big thank you to everyone for coming, to everyone for making a contribution, whether that's through your presence here or through what you've said verbally or through the chat. Please do get in touch if you think of anything. Often we come to these meetings and then we think about things afterwards. If you have any thoughts, any ideas, any suggestions, please email me. Our next session is on the 13th of April. That is about social care and inequalities. So there is an overlap between today's and next time. I'll be emailing you about it, but we look forward to seeing you then. Big thank you to everyone and lots of love to everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.